Could you please join me in congratulating Dr. Jason for a successful conference? Yeah, my topic is terrorism discourse, a comparative essay of terrorism and colonialism, yesterday's victims, today's perpetrators. Discourse calls on the world to move forward as rapidly as possible, and yet calls on the overthrow of a masterclass ideology, the one built on violence, destruction, and genocide, barbaric and inhumane. This presentation is a comparative analytical essay of two books, Mahmoud Mamdani, 2004, Good Muslim, Bad Muslim, America, the Cold War, and the Root of Terror, and Josebo Zaluka and William and Douglas. Their work in 1996, Terror and Taboo, The Follies, Fables, and Faces of Terrorism. However, I would be drawing from other sources as I explore this topic, terrorism discourse, and the concept of colonialism, which reinforces the idea that yesterday's victims of terrorism oftentimes tend to become today's perpetrators. I must also state that this work is underscoring the impact of colonialism in contributing to genocide by comparing it to terrorism than justifying the methodologies or the tactics of terrorist organizations. The psychological impact of this myth of racial and cultural superiority of the white-skinned person or the colonialists, which consists of the Western European countries, the United States and Japan, over other societies of the world was very immeasurable. For instance, in Africa, the event during and after the World War II broke the myth, which helped to remove the psychological barrier, and the quest for self-determination became pronounced throughout the continent. And I must say that I think AK's point is well taken here. A classical case in point is the Rwanda 1994 genocide, where over 1 million Hutus, ethnic groups, were massacred by the Tutsi brothers. As a matter of fact, 90% of them were civilians. Now, why was colonialism contributing? The Belgians, in fact, Rwanda was colonized by the Belgians. And what the Belgium, those from Belgium, in Europe. Now, the Belgians did something. What they did was that they set up a governmental system, which is the political, economic, and the social structure, where it sort of, developed a system of inequalities among these two ethnic groups. So, in a way, the Tutsis were more or less higher in status than the Hutus. So you realize that whereas the Tutsis, who are occupying positions of, like the lawyers, the teachers, the nurses, and what have you, as against that of what the Hutus, who were more or less doing menial jobs. And so when Appiah-Marfo, who was who was a Hutu president, had a brain crash, the Hutus eventually looked at it and said that was what an assassination from the Tutsis. And also, it also says as what the poetic justice for the Tutsis, because nothing good can come from the Hutu. No wonder they were able to reframe the Hutus in this massacre as cockroaches and were able to step on them. Many a times when you look at violence, Galton made a statement in 1967. He said, violence breeds violence. And so it also follows, or it goes on to say that excessive violence will definitely breeds excessive, violence as well. So it is imperative that we understand why a group is pushing somebody to a point. Once you push people to a point, it is only natural that they might roar. Even though people talk about the issue of Gandhi non-violence, there are some elements of violence in it. But when you look at it, as far as my understanding is concerned, when I look at it constructively, it is to sort of using violence, so to speak, in order to stop an oppression or an aggression from any other quarter. Because if I see that
I'm being pushed to that level, and my dignity is being, lost as a result of somebody's action or inaction, then it is only fair, because it is always said that freedom is not given on a silver platter. If you want it, you fight for it. And it is also important that human nature as we are wouldn't want to be under pain for far too long. So, yes, to some extent, violence is a bit constructive. Of course, conflict is even very constructive, because conflict, there is a good part of conflict and an evil part of conflict as well. Because through conflict, we then begin to have a perfect understanding of one another in order not to sidestep. And at the same time, it is also a vehicle for social change. So I think that even we can talk about the Karl Marx concept of, violence, what he talks about, the issue of the class, struggle. So basically, they are foundation to this, and I think this is the way I see it. Thanks. What is going through my mind right now is the fact that when you look at even what is going on in the world today, the issues of humanitarian intervention, as against the concept of sovereignty. We know that there are a couple of world countries in the world today, for instance, Rwanda, as I cited. It's a sovereign country, and it prevents people from actually coming in to intervene in their internal affairs, on which, of course, the United Nations Article 2 and 4 clearly prevents any member country from entering into another country for that purpose. However, the question is, do we sit down for such massive deaths to go on? We need to do something about it. That is why there's a need for what? The responsibility to protect. So then the question here is that responsibility to protect should have actually been captured into the UN Charter, but it wasn't done until recently, in 2005. Just recently. So it tells you that it is imperative we must move to prevent the genocide, as the sister talks about, move to prevent the Holocaust, move to prevent the massive deaths. As a matter of fact, General Darrier, who was the commander of the NATO forces that were in Rwanda as at the time, the UN forces, was saying that it was unfortunate that such incidents happened, because when they called, none went to help. We must come to that point in a place in life now to cherish the human life, rather than saying that, okay, you don't have to come into my country, I'm a sovereign country, I'm that. And meanwhile, a lot are being perished or dying. We need to deal with that. Thank you.